Target capital structure. Target capital structure is the optimal capital structure of a firm. So the it is a breakdown of the percentage of debt, preferred stock, and common equity, and and, and a capital structure that's going to maximize the value of the firm or the price of the firm's stock. So weighted average cost of capital. When a firm makes decisions on capital budgeting, we combine the costs of debt, preferred stock, common stock into a single required rate of return. The weighted average cost of capital, the weighted average of all the costs of all the components, representing the proportions of these sources of financing. So the weighted average cost of capital, or WACC, is the weight in debt multiplied by the after-tax cost of debt, or subscript DT, plus the weight in preferred stock multiplied by the required return for preferred stockholders. And then finally, the weight in stock multiplied by the cost of retained earnings, R sub S, or the cost of external equity, R sub E. So again, WD, proportion in debt, W subscript PS, proportion in preferred stock, and WS, proportion in common equity. So example here, we've got a firm with debt 45%. The after-tax cost of debt is 6%. The preferred stock is 5%. The cost of preferred stock, or required rate of return for preferred stockholders, is 11%. And then the cost of common equity, or common equity, is 50%. So it's a 13.5% for internal equity and 14.5% for external equity. So the firm can use retained earnings to finance through projects. So in other words, does not have to use retain new stock to finance its projects. So the weight of debt was 0.45. We multiply that by the after-tax cost of debt of 6%, plus 0.05, the weight in preferred stocks, times the required rate of return for the preferred stockholders of 11%, plus 0.5, or the weight in stocks, or common equity, multiplied by the cost of retained earnings of 13.5%. That gives us a 10% weighted average cost of capital. If the firm has to issue new stocks, then that's our calculation is going to change. Everything, let's see, right, this doesn't change and this doesn't change, but we're going to use our 14.5% here instead of the 13.5%. So that raises our cost of weighted average cost of capital from 10% to 10.5%. The logic behind weighted average cost of capital, so the use of debt impacts the use of equity and vice versa. So especially when you're talking about debt, debt holders have to be paid. So if you want to maximize the amount of debt that you can, but if the debt gets to be too large, it can become cumbersome and weigh down the company. So we've all seen examples of that. So since they're related to each other, the weighted average cost of capital needs to be used to evaluate projects regardless of the specific financing source used to fund a particular project. Marginal cost of capital, the weighted average cost of raising additional funds. So So generally the MCC is often greater than the weighted average cost of capital because the cost of new funding increases. So the firm's risk increases. There's also the cost associated with issuance of new debt and equity as well. So there's on the next slide, the MCC schedule graph shows the average cost of funds for various levels of financing. So in this example, so this is our Unilate example. If it generates $30.5 million in retained earnings, then what is the break point? What we do to calculate our break point is, in this case, it's $61 million, and that's based on the percentage of common equity with regard to the capital structure of the firm. So breakpoint occurs because the weighted average cost of capital increases, which is a point caused by any increase that increases any of the components cost of capital. Cost of funds increase because the firm uses higher amounts of capital, risk increases. So the breakpoint is we take the maximum amount of lower cost of capital of any given type. That would be, again, this would be provided in the problem, and then a proportion of that type of capital in the structure. So that calculates the break point for the cost of a new project, assuming we allocate it evenly based on the existing capital structure. And the next lecture, we'll start with a marginal cost of capital example.